All right, we do have a big update on that potential Group of Five super conference I referenced earlier this week. How about this? San Diego State fails in attempt to create new Power 5 conference with Pac-12, Mountain West, and American members. Apparently, San Diego State was the one spearheading this entire thing. It's kind of interesting considering they've been rumored possibly going to the Big 12. San Diego State's effort to rally a group of major programs into a new league fell short before it gained any momentum. San Diego State's president was leading a push to assemble what would have amounted to a breakaway of the best schools from the Mountain West and American conferences, along with some combination of Pac-12 leftovers, Cal, Stanford, Oregon State, and Washington State. However, the idea already died on Monday night after Mountain West presidents held a call that ended with leadership showing unity. So looks like the Mountain West wants to stay together. They're not giving any ground. And I'm guessing the Mountain West now will turn their attention to possibly Washington State, Oregon State, and California. Stanford, there's just no real chance there. We also do have the rumor that the ACC is in meetings, preliminary talks right now, or they at least had them today with California and Stanford about possibly joining the conference. That seems like it's just talks. Logistics don't make sense for that. The money doesn't make sense. I would say maybe California, but would California sacrifice that much travel just to get in a Power 5 conference? I don't really think so. Honestly, when it comes to the whole idea of trying to because you have these four, Pac-12 teams who are Power 5, using that to your advantage, plucking off the best teams from the American, plucking off the best teams from the Mountain West, I think it does make sense, but you can understand these conferences saying, no, we're going to put a halt to it. That's what the Mountain West has done. The development could clear way for Oregon State and Washington State to join the Mountain West, according to industry sources. They're telling CBS Sports the American has also expressed interest in the schools. Regardless, the next round of realignment seems to be on hold until the fate of Cal and Stanford in the ACC is decided. American athletic directors met Monday and held another call scheduled for Tuesday to consider Cal and Stanford. That seems like a waste of time. That's not happening. The American Conference is not going to be getting Cal and Stanford. It's not clear how any combination of leftover schools would have obtained Power 5 designation in a new conference. I think that was the whole idea behind this Group of 5 super conference. If you take the best teams, you could apply and say, we're a Power 5 league. We want all the luxuries that come along with it, including extra revenue. Now, a four-member league, the Pac-12 is in danger of losing the designation. I would imagine, they can't keep the designation as is right now. They have four members. The other thing is, would they merge with the Mountain West and try and say, let's keep this, let's make it a Pac-16, and then try and keep our designation? I still don't think that's possible. They're just not a Power 5 league. When you look at the Mountain West combined with what is left of the Pac-12, the four teams, it would be a Group of 5. And then San Diego State did not immediately request a return for comment. Does it make sense to take the best of the American remaining Pac and the best of the Mountain West to create a new conference that would potentially fight for A5 designation? In general, I think it does, an industry source said. I just am not sure what the value would bring from any network standpoint. ESPN and Fox have already spent their money, so that is another entanglement there, but it seems like those talks, there's just way too much going on. You would be talking about 3 different conferences coming together and plucking off all of the best teams. How would the buyouts work? With the TV deals, it seems like a complete mess. Nothing stays the same in life. Welcome to the new Big XX. I'm guessing this is the new Big 20, the nation's premier, most visible, best TV contract in college athletics history. And of course, this has the Big 10 adding Clemson and Florida State. It's certainly possible. I'm sure Florida State's interested in joining the Big 10. I'm sure Clemson is interested in it as well. There are just a bunch of things that need to happen, and the other big key here is ESPN. I think because of the situation with ESPN controlling the ACC and controlling the SEC in terms of their TV, I don't see ESPN letting either of these schools join a Fox conference, meaning the Big Ten, who, is in bed with Fox, and they've got the whole big noon thing. If Clemson and Florida State go anywhere, it just makes the most sense that it would be to the SEC. If you look at where they're located, I understand the Big Ten very interested in getting into Florida. They might try and go for Miami because they want to put a footprint down there and they want to get a team. It's understandable, but just off of everything, the SEC possibly mounting a counter, I see the SEC going after those teams hard. Another consideration for the college football playoff in a revamped 12-team model in 2024 would be the 12 best teams, period. I would agree with this. I think that's probably what they should do. People would have issues with it because it would be a lot of Big Ten teams and a lot of SEC teams. But at the end of the day, 12 teams is a lot as is. And I know there was a model out there that said, 4 teams from the Big Ten would automatically get in, 4 teams from the SEC would automatically get in, or something like that. And then it was like 3 or 2 teams from the Big 12 and ACC. I think the best thing is to just take the 12 best teams. And I think a group of 5 team, you should have a chance. Absolutely. If you go undefeated, let them in. They're probably going to get crushed, but we're talking about that 12th spot being 3 lost teams anyway, so the best way to do this is the most simple way, and it's just take the 12 best teams. I know people are not going to like that, and they're going to think, well, imagine like a 3-loss or a 4-loss. There won't be a 4-loss team in, but imagine a 9-3 Big Ten team or a 9-3 SEC team. I mean, guys, you have to think with how loaded these conferences are. You could have a team that loses on the road at Oregon, on the road at Ohio State, on the road at Michigan. They win every other game. They're 9-3. Do you leave them out at that point in a 12-team league for a Big 12 team that went 10-2 with a much easier schedule? It does seem like it's going to be a nightmare in terms of the debates, but I do think that's probably for the best. The Stanford president has come out and published a paper demonstrating the travel distance from Stanford and Cal to the ACC isn't that bad. It looks like California has impregnated the state of Ohio, and I didn't know Stanford and Cal were that close to me. I'm going to have to go visit their campuses, but yeah, look, the whole thing last year, everyone was making a huge deal about USC and UCLA joining the Big Ten when the closest teams to them were Iowa and Nebraska, and I said, yes, it's a nightmare. That's why they're already plotting to have a West Wing. I knew they were creating it, and guess what? USC and UCLA didn't even play one down in the Big Ten alone on the West Coast. In 2024, they're joining the conference, and so is Oregon and Washington, and that's going to mitigate travel. That is not the same thing with the ACC. It would just be these 2 teams, and they would be sacrificing a ton in terms of travel based on their location. And Notre Dame isn't even in the conference for football, so that's the entire coastline on the eastern. It's too much travel, and it's not enough money for Stanford and California. Maybe California might consider it if they don't have really any other good options and they want to join a Power 5 league, but I can't see Stanford doing it. According to AP, here is what the real Apple offer that was never voted on by the Pac-12 was: a base of $24 to $25 million per school per year. If the service got to 2.5 million subscribers, the yearly payout would have jumped to $30 million, comparable to the Big 12's payout of around $31.5 million. Could have been better. We will never know. So in doing some research, it would have been very surprising if this current Pac-12 would have gotten to 2.5 million subscribers. There's comparisons that they very likely would have been under that number. And it isn't just about the money. It is about the relevancy. It is about who you're doing a TV deal with. Apple, streaming. Washington and Oregon wanted no part of that. They knew they were going to be irrelevant if it happened. Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah also realized that. And they said, look, even if it is similar pay, it does not make sense for us because we're just not going to have anyone watching our games being streaming only rather than going to the Big 12 and getting games on ESPN and the whole shebang there. Latest absurd college conference realignment makes a mess of math and geography. I'm guessing that's referencing Stanford and Cal to the ACC. I mean, technically, the latest realignment helped the geography because the Big Ten added 2 more, teams on the West Coast, which will mitigate travel concerns. But yes, if Stanford and Cal go to the ACC, that's just another ridiculous part of the situation. Regardless, if Florida State is absolutely available, would the SEC be worried that the Big Ten or Big 12, they would not be worried about the Big 12. Let me just say, Florida State is not going to the Big 12, but would they be worried about the Big 10 and them grabbing the Seminoles and encroach on their territory? I'm still not sure that's a compelling enough for Commissioner Greg Sankey and the SEC presidents to act. Yeah, listen, the whole idea that the SEC is going to just stand there and let the Big Ten pluck Florida State and Clemson, I cannot believe that. I'm sorry. I know the SEC has said we're fine at 16 teams, but the Big Ten just said with their new commissioner, they came out a few weeks ago and said, no, we're not adding. We want to get our teams acclimated. So it just makes so much sense for the SEC to nab Clemson and Florida State if they can get out of this deal. And also ESPN. I mean, ESPN controls this TV deal, right? So would ESPN, outside of Florida State, just doing a ridiculous buyout, if there's some type of deal worked out, ESPN would say, all right, in FSU, you've got to go to the SEC because then we can get more content, we can farm bigger games, better ratings, go to a 9-game conference schedule, give us more content to work with, and also that'll create more revenue. So I don't think there's much of a chance based on how the TV contracts are entangled with ESPN being a major player in both the SEC and the ACC. I don't see that happening. I think Florida State and Clemson, I know there's rumors about Florida State to the Big Ten. I don't see it personally unless they want to raise the money to pay a massive buyout and just bully their way out of the conference, or there's some type of legal thing they can do where 8 schools come together to vote to break the grant of rights and in that case become essential free agents. Maybe then you'd be talking about those teams going to the Big Ten. But this is very similar to the Oregon and Washington scenario where, let's be honest, Clemson and FSU to the SEC makes way too much sense if something's going to happen here. There's no way the SEC sits by and lets that happen. I just don't see it. I understand the SEC is still very powerful without Clemson and FSU, but that is crazy. I've also heard a rumor right now the only team the SEC would take is Notre Dame. Now, obviously, Notre Dame is going to be an independent for the foreseeable future, but I do imagine that will change at some point. Notre Dame, it's a little bit more complicated. I think in the end, Notre Dame is headed to the Big Ten. It is the best fit in terms of culture. But either way, guys, that is the current situation regarding realignment. That's going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on X. Link to that's always in the description.